Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. One more time. Good afternoon, everybody. Excellent. How are we doing today? Very good. My name is Stace, Lindsay, and I am your lunchtime entertainment today. My topic is understanding our collective impact. But before getting to that topic, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a Henry Crown Fellow in the 6th class. My project as a Henry Crown Fellow is to help launch CALI, the Central American Leadership Initiative. And I have to say, if nothing else, CALI brings a hell of a lot of energy to these gatherings. I also moderate the Middle East Leadership Initiative. We have a great contingent from the Middle East Leadership Initiative here. And as of last January, I've actually become a full-time employee of the Aspen Institute. And one of the first tasks I've been given is to understand, are we making a difference? And when I think about are we making a difference, that becomes one of these problems that is literally a rabbit's hole of complexity. Measuring it, understanding it, trying to explain it. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through very briefly. I'm going to actually break the first rule that Peter mentioned, or Walter mentioned earlier, which is no PowerPoints at Aspen. You're going to get a few PowerPoints. Part of that's the recovering consultant in me. But part of it is because what we're doing, I think a few visual models will be helpful. And so what I'd like to do, many of you are new to the Aspen Global Leadership Network. This may be your first time in Aspen. So part one will be just to explain a little bit, what are we trying to do? And part two will be explaining to you what I think we have done. Now, if I'm successful, this will seem somewhat like what Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, I long for the simplicity, the other side of complexity. I could probably spend 5 hours talking about all I've been learning about projects and impact, but I'm going to try to summarize it for you in about 30 minutes. Okay? Let me begin by asking, how many in this room have done a project? All right, and apart from the McNulty laureates, how many of you are really excited about the project that you've done? Fantastic. Projects are one piece of the puzzle. Let me explain the rest of the puzzle. Our mission at the Aspen Global Leadership Network is to, in a word, forge a global network of entrepreneurial leaders in society who are committed to each other and to the betterment of society. Right? If I could try to summarize the complexity of what we do, it is that. We do that in 3 ways. There are 3 pillars to the program by my way of thinking. And the first is about personal growth. The fundamental, most important work that we do is with you as fellows. We create space for you to hit the pause button on very busy lives. We challenge you to reflect deeply on your own values. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? What choices do you face? We ask you to evaluate those choices and any gap there is between the values you hold and the life that you're living. And evaluate that and ask yourself, what might I be doing differently? And then to commit to doing that. In a word, that would be to paint your life on a broader canvas. So the first and most fundamental piece of this work is the personal transformation of every fellow who comes through this program. The second is what you're experiencing right now. It's a global fellowship. I'm astonished every time I bring together a new group of fellows between the ages of 30 and 45, and they realize we can actually make new, deep, close friends for life at this stage in life, because your day-to-day lives don't enable that. So this global fellowship enables you to connect with one another, build new friendships, inspire one another, find ways to collaborate together, and through that collaboration to begin to leverage your own passions, your own talents, and your own ability to make a difference in the world. I'm reminded of Margaret Mead's quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And when I look around this room and I see the videos from last night, and I think about the energy and the impact, and the sheer sense of optimism and hope that's in this room itself, I couldn't agree more. So I think this is incredibly important work that we're doing, and this global fellowship is a very big part of it. In the last 17 years, this fellowship, which began with the Henry Crown Fellowship and is 20 fellows a year at the Henry Crown Fellowship, is now over 2,000 strong. By the end of 2015, we'll be 2,100 fellows around the world. There's another interesting fact, I think. We are now putting on over 30 seminars a year. Almost every other week, somewhere in the world, we're performing one of these seminars. We're bringing fellows together and giving them this opportunity to think and reflect. Put another way, collectively, we've invested over 300,000 hours at the seminar table. Outside of the seminar table, by my calculations, at least 150,000. But if you were to join me at a college seminar, you'd realize that's way underestimated because they don't seem to sleep. We are investing a huge amount of time in this collective effort. When I think about the projects, their design is to challenge you as fellows, to engage you. Many fellows will talk about they feel isolated and in a bubble. And a project becomes an opportunity to challenge you to step outside of your bubble, to do creative work to make a difference. And as this is the action forum, to do stuff, to act, to step up, to do that which you can to make a difference in your community. When I ask the fellows, they put it this way. I've been running focus groups around the country to understand what has your experience with projects been. One person told me it's to cultivate a practice of putting our values into action. And she said, just doing these projects makes you aware of the fact that there's much more you can be doing. And the first project itself may not be huge, but the practice of doing projects, of looking for opportunities, of asking yourself what I might do, prepares you for that moment when a need comes up, and instead of looking at it and saying, what a shame, you say, I can do something. So practice is important to the fellows. Another piece I mentioned is creativity. One of the fellows says, the project challenged me to ask, what if? What if I thought differently about this? What if we rethought the way this is done? Projects also engender commitment. Somebody said the project is a forcing mechanism. It prompts us to step into the arena, off of the sidelines. And finally, I think the projects have given many fellows a sense of meaning. It's the nudge to significance. You've heard time and again this week, moving from success to significance. I'm reminded of Stefan Schmidheiny, a very successful Swiss entrepreneur and philanthropist, very active in Latin America, who once said, it's hard to consider yourself a success if you live in a failed society. And we live in increasingly failed societies and communities. So how can we use the projects to think about meaning in our own lives? Next, why projects? Well, if you look at the complexity, this is a chart that we use to explain the projects. Over time, the current solutions remain somewhat stagnant, and the challenges that we face are increasingly complex and numerous. And that gap is troubling. So another reason we do projects is to close that gap. And once again, I can't think of a better group of people to address this challenge than this global network of highly motivated, highly successful, entrepreneurial, creative leaders, taking their talents and skills and resources and applying them to the critical challenges that their communities face. So we do projects both to challenge the fellows and to make a dent in the universe, to make a real difference. The Greeks had a word for this, praxis, turning thought into action. And I think that's appropriate for why we do projects. From Greek to Latin, the Latin roots of the word impact, which is what we hope this activity creates, is about pushing against. This week, we've talked about a lot of the challenges that we face, and we're pushing against an awful lot. But we're pushing against an awful lot together. Now, this is a picture of an elephant and 6 blind men. Many of you are familiar with this story, but when I think about the challenge of understanding our impact, it reminds me of this. I'll talk to some people, and it's all about scaling successful projects to address the needs of millions of people. Other people will say, you know what? my life is my project. It's about me getting back into balance. It is like this blind man holding on to the trunk of the elephant and saying, I've got a snake here. Or somebody holding on to the tail and saying, no, it's actually a rope. Another one holding on to the leg and saying, what we've got is a tree trunk. What we measure depends partly on what we're holding on to and what we're looking at. And so I want to share with you now a few visual frameworks that will at least inform you how I'm currently thinking about this, and I would love to get your feedback about how you think about our impact. The first thing I would say is that the impact is focused, as I said, if we begin with our core thesis of bringing this global network together, we do work that's focused on personal growth first and foremost. And we believe that if enlightened, effective leaders step up with a clear vision of what the good society is, they will make a difference. And when those two come together, we've got great alignment and a great joy for fellows achieving that which they can achieve, and in the process having impact in society. That impact, as I said, in my mind, is about personal growth, the projects that you do, and the global fellowship that we're building. But this is a process that occurs over time. So we all have our life before our particular first encounter with the Aspen Institute. And then we have this magical period where the world stops, we've got new friends, new inspiration, new ideas, and we say, what if? Let's do something different. We're asked to do projects. Many of you hate the process of projects. Many of you love them and see them as an opportunity. You build new connections. You build new relationships. You make new commitments. All of this happens within the window of this fellowship. And then you graduate. I've had many fellows come up to me at the graduation seminar and say, can you please fail me? Because I want to come back next year and do more of this, right? Don't give me my certificate. I want to come back. And that's good news. And so what happens is post-fellowship, life goes on, but we stay connected. And the Aspen Global Leadership Network is trying to do a couple of things. We create events that we hope will bring you together and re-stimulate this virtuous circle where you're faced with new ideas, new choices, new commitments. You come up with new projects, new businesses. Things continue to happen, but you need some prompting. So what we've designed are a number of opportunities for you to be prompted. I think my clicker needs batteries. There we go. The Globalization Seminar, many of you have experienced that, where we bring people together from around the world for the third seminar. This is an opportunity to connect, be inspired, see new opportunities. Alumni seminars that we offer, that you can come back and get that injection shot of the fellowship experience. We're very active in making personal introductions. When we see somebody's doing something interesting, oh, you should talk to so-and-so in a different country to make that connection. Many of you have regional gatherings in cities, in countries, across the nation, bringing the fellows together and figuring out how do we collaborate more effectively. Class reunions are fundamental. Every class in this network has annual or semi-annual or biannual reunions where they get together and reconnect with each other. The McNulty Prize Award event is a gathering of like-minded individuals to come together, and new sparks and connections are made there. Not to mention the Aspen policy gatherings, which happen in DC, in Aspen, around the world, and of course the Ideas Festival. So if this is the model over time, one measures the impact not just by their project or by what happened in their fellowship. Tanya, I don't remember what the numbers were, but you said the average age, the age span of Henry Crown Fellows is from 32 to 63, if I remember correctly. That's a lot of good work. Right? That's a lot of runway for us to do good things. So on projects, I've been doing a lot of work with the generous support of Larry Height to look at our impact and what can we do to increase the probability of project success. Tomorrow we'll be visiting Robert F. Kennedy and his speech to South Africa, where he said, some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? And that's really the spirit of the project. Why not? Why can't we do things differently? We currently have 932 projects in our database spanning the entire globe. We have about 27% of those are focused on the area of education. That's 280 some projects focused on education. Civic engagement, which is about fixing broken institutions, fighting corruption, transparency. Economic development is a big concern in many of the projects, as is improving health and developing leadership and values. There are many others that don't take up quite as big a slice of the pie, but our interests are broad and varied. One way to look at projects is what areas are people working in. What I found is equally interesting is to ask, what are fellows actually doing? So there's a group of projects which are about promoting or providing directly education, training, mentorship, nutrition, healthcare, capital, infrastructure. There are projects that are focused on meeting direct needs. And I want to just call attention to a couple of them. And I realize that this is a room full of people doing this type of work, so I don't want to play favorites. But Jacob Leaf is a South African fellow who has an amazing project focused on helping children over a 20-year time span. He begins pre-birth and is committed to see these children through their first job. It costs about $5,000 a year to do that. So that's a big commitment. He was at a fundraiser in New York recently and was explaining to a woman who was asking him, well, tell me about your metrics. How many children? What's the return on investment? How much are we going to see back from what we're investing in? And he stopped her and he just said, let me ask you a simple question. Do you have children? She said, yeah. And he said, well, how much are you investing in your own children in New York City? And he said, the blood just went from her face. Because when it comes to your own children, no amount of time or money is enough. But for some reason, when we think about helping children at scale, we think we need to run 40 or 50,000 of them through and be somehow more magically efficient than any of us who are parents know. It's an infinite amount of time and energy and resources that go into creating healthy children over the course of time. That's a project, along with Hildegard Vasquez's captive project and many others, that go deep. Deep personal transformation. That takes time and commitment. That doesn't tell sexy stories that make headlines. But when I think about impact, it's very real. There are also those that go broad. And I think of Jordan Castelo, the McNulty Prize winner, who last year, through his organization, was able to provide over 500,000 classes to people to give them back their economic livelihood. Or Manoj, who we heard earlier, is working with women in India, providing 10,000 women opportunity to increase their incomes by participating in high-end quality coffee. So many of you are providing direct services, some at scale and some at depth. I think both are equally valid. Another way that we do the work that we do is by advocating. We take a point of view. Policy, human rights, resource allocation of governments, transparency, legislation. And here I just want to give you an astonishing story. Henry Crown Fellow Ben Lilienthal, who dismissed his project to me as not being very hard. But he was able to insert language with a group of friends into the 2013 US Farm Bill, and as a result of that, has unleashed $500 million to provide high-quality, locally produced food, fruits and vegetables to poor communities across the country. So you look at the work that Jacob's doing, a 20-year commitment to kids, and the work Ben's doing, which is a paragraph in a piece of legislation. Both are equally important. Both are profound. And it raises the question to us, what are the levers at our disposal to create change? Another is convening and mobilizing. Many of the projects are focused on doing what Aspen does best, creating a safe space for people to come together and have those difficult conversations. Many of our projects have resulted in what is now the Aspen Global Leadership Network. So that is an example. Marlon Hernandez from El Salvador, who had a project workshop yesterday, is doing the same thing in El Salvador, where political polarization is devastating the ability of the country to pull itself together, creating a safe space for leaders to talk. We do a lot of creation. We create institutions, companies, tools, products. We create jobs. We create new content. Adam Lowry, who's in here somewhere, we saw him on the video last night with Method Plastics. His Cato group of fellows were very troubled by the amount of plastics in the world's oceans. And he said, I've got a company that can do something about that. So I've organized a campaign to collect all of the plastic, develop new technology to recycle it and reuse it as a branded product, Ocean Plastics, which you can find in the grocery store. An astonishing story of creation. We do leverage very well. Rachel Goslin works at the U.S. Presidential Commission on the Arts. From that position, she's been able to leverage over $6 million worth of capital this year to go into arts funding for schools, for kids. 2 South African fellows who were involved in a large chicken franchise company, fast food, realized that they have an incredible capacity to understand how to deliver complex, fresh, healthy food quickly at scale. In South Africa, 9 million children a day go to school hungry. They've partnered with the Department of Education to leverage their business technology to deliver 7 million of those breakfasts every day now. Unbelievable impact, leveraging that which they know and the platform that they have. And finally, I would say promoting is something we see a lot of. Promoting ideas, promoting the arts, promoting values, promoting awareness. Another South African fellow is working on the problem of violence against women, and by next month we'll have developed a campaign that reaches over 1 million South African girls on the issue of stopping violence. So across the board, whether we're working in education or agriculture or healthcare, whether we're providing, advocating, or convening, we're doing fantastic work. And it is absolutely inspiring as you begin to get to know the stories. And I would encourage you to talk to one another and see these stories and listen. Now, measuring this is really hard. The survey that I did, I sent out a survey to all 932 projects. I got 150 responses back. So the rest of you still have time to talk to me. From just that small sample, we have over $315 million of investment capital that have been raised to invest in new companies. If I add Bill Bynum's onto that from last night, if I understand correctly, it should be another 200 million, so it's at least 515 million. And if we want to get clever, we can actually say, if I think I heard Bill correctly, that 200 million has leveraged 2 billion more into the Delta. So we're arguably at $2.5 billion of capital generated by projects. I suspect that's a very small percentage of what we're actually doing. Likewise, our organizations, the 15% of you who responded, are generating $40 million a year to run nonprofits or businesses that are doing this work. That's out of nothing to $40 million a year. You know what that can support. This is a hard one to measure, but I asked fellows, how many lives is your project touching? The number that came back was around 4.5 million. That's not an insignificant number of lives that have been touched by these fellows. But if we throw in the South African project, that number is probably closer to 13 million. And if we actually all start reporting what we're doing, the number will be much bigger. Not all projects succeed. Andrew Kasoy, I love this quote, so I'm going to read it in its entirety. He said, "Stace, my original project failed. Wars got rolling and the economy started to get hot. Other stories got a lot more exciting and their interests faded. By the time that happened, I'd lost a lot of steam for that specific idea. But the thinking that went into that idea morphed into a search for innovative solutions, innovative alternatives to the existing system for solving our biggest problems, which turned into a deep dive into mentoring social entrepreneurs, which in turn turned into the recognition of a need for systems and market infrastructure to support these entrepreneurs, which in turned into a merged set of ideas from Jake Cohen, Bart Hulan, and me to create B-Lab. Bart's with us now, and we have 3 fellows working together, fueled in part by the inspiration of a quote-unquote failed project. That's another astonishing story. Many projects don't succeed, and the question I want to ask you is, what are you learning when you fail? And how do we incorporate that to increase our ability to make impact in the world? So what am I learning from this so far? We got a lot of superstars doing great work. Our challenge is to build a constellation. 285 fellows working in projects in education, not talking to each other. That's huge wasted opportunity for us to collaborate, learn, and work more effectively. From projects to commitments, projects have a definitive time frame, but as these action pledges show, we're all interested in making ongoing commitments. So there's no expiration date on a project. It's a lifelong commitment to service and doing that which we can. We need to learn to celebrate the victories, and victory might be measured in one life changed. I think of Miriam and her work in northern Uganda, or northern Nigeria, from last night. The profound power and profound disruption to husbands across northern Nigeria of her work. That is fantastic. And we need to learn to embrace the failures. And let me tell you, we need to collect the data and tell the stories. I suspect I haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg of this aspect of impact. One thing we will commit to you is we're going to develop a roadmap and toolkits to enhance the likelihood that every project will succeed. More clarity on what a project is, what it's for, what works, what doesn't work, who else is doing it. Let's stop reinventing the wheel and make a difference. So how are we working together to increase our impact? Just want to give you a few stories that for me are incredibly inspiring. In the globalization seminar in India a few years ago, two fellows came together. Manoj Kumar was moderating with me and Heather Son, and a fellow from Guatemala, Juan Carlos Pais. Juan Carlos is deeply committed to the issue of malnutrition in Guatemala. His project was focused on addressing the needs of 40,000 kids in Guatemala, and then he met Manoj. And over lunch one day, he was asking Manoj about his job, and he realized Manoj every day, through his day job, feeds 1.2 million children a day. And Juan Carlos came up to me after and said, I'm not even thinking at the right scale. 40,000 is nothing. Our need is far greater than that. And lo and behold, a few months later, I get a note from Juan Carlos saying, I'm actually in the process of securing $500 million of extra funding for Guatemala malnutrition through the Millennium Development Corporation. 2 days ago, I got a letter from him saying, you know what, this has morphed. He's now a minister on the cabinet, responsible for investment and development, and he's spearheading something called the 1,000 Days Campaign, which to date has reduced malnutrition in Guatemala by 1.7% and leveraged over $8 billion of assets to address this issue in Guatemala, right? That's unbelievable. It brings tears to my eyes to think about that. That happened because of a globalization seminar and a conversation at lunch. Imagine if we were more thoughtful and proactive in making these connections. My number has just jumped right from 8 million to 10 billion as a result of this. So I'd love to get your help in thinking about this level of impact. A couple other quick stories. So the little triangle here indicates after your fellowship these events that can reignite this cycle. Laila Ibrahim, who's a Henry Crown Fellow, works at Kleiner Perkins. Her project is Team for Tech. She wants to leverage the skills of Silicon Valley to do technical training all over the world. And she started earlier this year in Africa. And the Africa Leadership Fellows in Kenya rolled out the red carpet and said, come here. And they set up workshops all over Kenya for her and her team to do training. The Indian Fellows are doing the same thing, and she'll be in South Africa in a month to do the same thing. For somebody who has skills that the world needs, what a fantastic distribution system, right? And this project illustrates that. Economic development, quickly. You all heard Bruce Robertson the other day, one of my personal heroes for the work he's doing in northern Uganda. He met Jacqueline Novogratz and Willie Foote, both Henry Crown Fellows. Jacqueline runs a fund focused on the type of work Bruce does. Willie runs a fund and technical training organization. As a result of those conversations and Bruce's vision for northern Uganda, they've raised $4 million to support the 45,000 families that Bruce talked about committing to serve next year. None of that would have happened if these connections weren't made. In a crisis, we've got lots of crises around the world. What happens? From Nigeria, we must fulfill our civic responsibilities and show our elected officials what true leadership means, to stand with the Chibok community and to get involved in whatever capacity that we can to help bring back our girls and fight the scourge of Boko Haram. We must move from dialogue to action to ensure that our children are safe and secure. They've created theater productions to raise awareness. They've been on the international media bringing attention to this issue. They've organized and participated in rallies. And they came together as fellows to give a statement to the public of how troubling this is and what needs to be done. These are fellows coming together around a specific need. another great source of inspiration. The McNulty Prize event. I could go on for hours on this. I'm just going to give you two other quick examples. Last year at the McNulty Prize event, Maya heard Bill's speech receiving the reward. Maya Rocketmore, Henry Crown Fellow, and she said, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm working on. We need to work together. Created the first ever Color of Wealth Summit on Capitol Hill in 2014 to increase access to financial resources to communities of color in poor parts of the United States. Another thing that wouldn't have happened hadn't been for this connection. And finally, we heard from Jason earlier this week, feels like earlier this year, and the film that he's going to premiere tomorrow. This has been a lifelong effort of his, this conservation work, but it came to fruition as a result of this Good Life seminar that he participated in with Keith Berwick and a number of other fellows in Guatemala who gave him the courage, the inspiration, and I think he would say a kick in the pants to not give up, resulting in what is now, by his account, the largest conservation project in American history, and a movie that we all get to watch tomorrow night. Fantastic work, Jason. So that's the power of the global network. The inspiration and courage you provide to one another, I feel it every time I'm in this room with you. The potential you have to collaborate and increase the impact and sharing of knowledge that we all have. The importance of paying attention, making connections, of honoring the ritual to read to one another, to be present when you're together. And did I say this yet? The need to collect data and tell the stories. This is happening every day all over the planet, and we don't know about it. Finally, one fundamental question. Harry Strachan, my co-moderator and colleague, used to be a partner at Bain Consulting. And he said, when we would finish a job, the partners would get together and ask one question of themselves. Did our client do something they wouldn't have done if we hadn't shown up? And I thought that was a really appropriate question to ask us of ourselves. So what are you doing now that you would not be doing if it were not for your fellowship experience? I was in Honduras to graduate the 8th class of Kali Fellows recently. We had a cocktail party, and I just asked the fellows honestly because we just selected the 10th class of fellows. Is it worth it? Are we making a difference? And they said, well, Stace, we've built 7 schools and we're doing a recycling program, and our projects may not look all that sexy, but let me tell you what's happening behind the scenes. So we have here 7 fellows. Aline on the left ran a car dealership before her fellowship. Amin in the renewable energy space. Tete in the insurance business. Juan Diego was a vice mayor. Juan Orlando was a congressman. Jose Jesus worked at a university. And May worked at Walmart in corporate affairs. And they said, but after the fellowship, we all returned, and we've changed what we're doing. Aline's now president of the most important chamber of business, the industry association in all of Honduras. Amin is working as the head of the Chamber of Commerce of San Pedro Sula. Tete is the head of the Insurance Industry Association. Juan Diego is running the largest technical training center in all of Honduras. Juan Orlando became the first publicly elected president in the entire Global Leadership Network. Jose Jesus has stepped up in running a bigger role of the university, and May is actually president of the American Chamber of Commerce. This is just 7. There's about 15 others doing similar work. So what's happening in Honduras? None of this will show up on our data. But they're solving Social Security reform. They're creating a national investment plan. They're working on healthcare reform. They're reforming the electrical industry, and they're working hard on national security. And how are they doing it? This isn't a Kali initiative. They're picking up the phone. They're calling one another. The president will call and say, I need your help with this, and he will say, I get it. And they'll rally the business community to support this. They'll reach out to the unions to support this. None of this will you ever read about. And none of this would have happened if it weren't for Kali and the commitment of these fellows to each other to bring out the best in one another. And I should add, in Panama, the first ever elected female vice president of Panama is a Kali fellow. She has gathered around her 10 other Kali fellows, many of whom are serving on the cabinet and most of whom are working at senior advisory levels for the new president to put Panama back on the right path. I needn't say, the United States, 4 members of the cabinet are part of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. 5, Peter's telling me in the back. It's unbelievable to see what happens, and none of this shows up, and it's all a function of people stepping into this broader canvas that they want to paint their lives on, realizing that there's more that they can do as a function of their own personal growth. So what do I learn from this? We all have to hit pause and step back and ask ourselves, are we doing that which we should do? If we're not, how do we realign ourselves so that what we believe in deeply and what we're spending our time on aligns with our core values? And then pick up the phone, because it matters. Now, just to wrap up, you all have cards at your table, and these are here for a reason. Collect the data and tell the stories. We don't know clearly what projects you're working on, what initiatives, what impact you're having, what commitments you're making, new roles and responsibilities. We try hard, but it was pointed out to me today, my project in the Aspen Global Leadership Database hasn't been updated since 2003. So I'm as guilty as the next person. We want to know. If we don't have good data, we can't help you. Tennis balls, love it or hate it, the tennis ball metaphor is, what problems are you working on? What's capturing your imagination right now? If we know what you're working on, what you're struggling with, what opportunities you're seeing, we can help you. So next, where do you need help? And where can you help others? If we don't know, we can't make the connections. So at everybody's table is this card. And I just ask you to take a few moments and fill that in so that we can begin to incorporate this and more proactively make these connections. So I want to leave you, I've covered a lot. I want to leave you with 4 thoughts. Impact is personal. It starts with you as a leader, asking yourself the hard questions and listening to your fellows. It's collective. We can't go it alone. It's too lonely and it's too damn inefficient. We've got to work together. It's creative. Ask yourself, what if? And it's audacious. Ask yourself, why not? Thank you.
There will be refreshments and some light fare outside, but if everybody could be back in their seats by 2:30 with the conversation with Secretary Albright. Thank you.